today to comment on the unprofessionalism I witnessed at the budget meeting last week. I'm appalled and quite frankly embarrassed by the behavior of my elected officials. Two adults arguing back and forth for some 30 minutes or more is beyond ridiculous. What's also ridiculous is the fact that the rest of the adults in this room sat by and watched in silence. Nothing about those 30 plus minutes serves the people of Collin County. I mean, don't get me wrong, as a Democrat, I enjoy seeing Republicans infighting. But I think Democrats and moderate Republicans alike are tired of politicians engaging in this type of behavior. I'm also concerned that you, Judge Hill, see politics as confrontational. Why? Don't most of us want elected officials that instead of politics being confrontational, choose to be instead compromising? Whether left, right, forward, or left, right, or center, don't we all want our elected officials moving in one direction, forward? The behavior at that budget meeting was not productive. Along with compromise, I also expect my elected officials to have integrity. Another thing I think most reasonable people can agree on. Calling this court your bully pulpit, how is that productive? Saying you forgot to copy Skipworth and Wyatt on emails as per county policy slipped your mind? Does that mean you're incompetent or purposely breaking policy? Integrity. I want to have elected officials that act with integrity. Lastly, who gives you the right to be disrespectful in this courtroom to anyone? We are citizens of this community, and yes, even Mrs. Finley. Why do you speak to people the way that you do? You sounded as if you were a father speaking to a rebellious teenager. Who does that? I don't know why the rest of you allow this disrespectful behavior continue, but you're also our commissioners. You also must have integrity, and your silence is complicity. In 2022, we have an opportunity to elect two new county commissioners, in Scott Coleman and Roe Mayer, two candidates with integrity, and that know how to adult. I can't wait.
Thank you, Ms. Michel, for joining us. Our next speaker will be Mr. Mark Brewhe. Welcome, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
We're going to do minority today.
You have 3 minutes.
I grew up here. I came here when I was 10 years old. This is a great county. Y'all have done a great job, and it's safe. Great place to raise a family, clean. That's what I'll start out with. The reason why I'm here today is that I want you to take notice that I'm concerned that the CDC is changing the way they record vaccinated and unvaccinated people at the hospital and who is sick and who is not. They've recently changed that from what I understand. I want you to verify it. I want the hospitals to clarify whether or not somebody's been vaccinated or not and mark it down and clarify all the number of COVID patients. So I want you to check that out. And then I want to read a few things to you today that I don't think most people are aware of that have to do with the vaccine. So just over the weekend, there was a doctor in Israel, I'm going to say his name wrong, but Dr. Kobi Haviv, medical director of Herzog Hospital in Jerusalem, said that 85 to 90% of the hospitalizations in fully vaccinated people and 95% are in severe patients are vaccinated. 12 out of 13 countries in Johns Hopkins list of vaccinated are currently listed with the CDC as high or very high risk of COVID travel risk. There was a doctor 2 months ago in Israel said that 140 of his 141 patients had been taking both injections of the vaccine, and the other one had only taken one. I want to mention to you 3 doctors that there's dozens of doctors who are coming out of the woodwork warning us about this vaccine, but the 3 that are the top ones that I want to mention out are Dr. Harvey Reish he's the head of the epidemiology and medical clinic or medical department of Yale University. A few months ago said 60% of all new COVID patients at hospitals are vaccinated. Peter McCullen, I'd take about 20 minutes to read all of his bio. It's amazing. He's here from Dallas. He's testified in front of the Senate, Texas, He said that the vaccine is neither, as of recently, he believes the vaccine is neither safe or effective. The third one, and probably most chilling, by the way, all these people have dedicated their lives to vaccines. The third and probably most chilling is the man who created the I can't remember, it's the type of technology they use in the vaccine. His name is Dr. Robert Malone. He has grave concerns about this vaccine. He also believes that this new Delta variant is coming from the vaccine.
Thank you, Mr. Brewhe. We appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you.
Our next speaker today is going to be Mr. Scott Coleman. Welcome, Mr. Coleman. Thank you for joining us today. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate your time today. I'm here on behalf of Collin County residents, but especially DFW nurses, doctors, and health workers who are describing the current COVID situation as dangerous and backpedaling. In Houston last week, an 11-month-old child had to be sent to a hospital 150 miles away due to a lack of bed space because of COVID. For the first time since February, our great nation is averaging 100,000 new COVID cases per day. And last week, just after he called immunologist Dr. Fauci a power-tripping lying freak, Republican conservative radio host Dick Farrell died of COVID. Yet amidst all these stories, the commissioners have not taken 2 simple steps to keep our county safe, but should. Number 1, encourage everyone to get vaccinated as part of the county campaign. And number 2, call on Governor Abbott and Ken Paxton to stop taking away the freedom and give local entities like schools and their parents the freedom to decide how to keep their community safe the best. Collin County is an educated county made up of professionals, many of whom are immigrants from all over the world. The entire Collin County government community deserves leadership that is not afraid to take the 2 steps. And so far, we have seen practically nothing from the Collin County Commissioners in either of these. Commissioner Hale, in a recent Facebook post, you talk about how you do not fear dying and how you feel like you might be living in a dystopia. I found this post a little bit weird, but what's most disturbing about this post is that apparently it composes most of the official communication for the entire Commissioners Court. Judge Hill, commissioners, you have not discussed any campaign or plan to get people vaccinated. In the county website, there's no campaign or plan to get people vaccinated. And on social media and on Facebook, there's no plan or campaign to encourage people to get vaccinated. Judge Hill and commissioners, the county deserves more than your silence. Your job is to disseminate accurate health and safety information from Texas health officials, epidemiologists, and other healthcare experts. Commissioner Hale, I want to compliment you on quoting our 35th president, John F. Kennedy. I personally believe that Republicans have a lot to learn about that president, namely the issue of good government. And as you know, it was after his period that the nation's Southern conservatives, being against racially integrating public schools, left the Democratic Party and joined the Republican Party. And from Richard Nixon to Donald Trump, the Republican Party has never been the same. I will close with our 35th president, who said, "The link between leadership and learning is not only essential at the community, ignorance and misinformation can handicap the process. We need to summon all the energies of our people and the capacities of our leaders if America is to remain a great and free nation. Our residents have lost faith in the capacity of the Collin Commissioners to further a great and free Collin County. And if it can't, it should return the money and time it has wasted for the community." Thank you for your time.
We appreciate you being with us today. Our next speaker will be Mr. Ray Ash. Welcome, Mr. Ash. Thank you for joining us today. You have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. Recently, as I'm sure you know, there's been a surge in COVID cases all over the country, and especially here in Texas. The vaccination rate in the whole state of Texas is probably around 53%, and in Collin County it's around 61%, which is better than the state law, but that's still not good enough. You know, people, ordinary, everyday people follow the leader, all right? So you guys are the leaders. So if you just lead and tell the people that they ought to get vaccinated, they will follow, all right? They look to you for leadership, you need to lead. I'm concerned about the spike in in cases, and more particularly about the spike in deaths to taxpayers and families all over Collin County, and also the devastation that it has caused to small and minority businesses. Now, I recall that last year, that was in 2020, this court made some missteps in responding to the COVID pandemic, and those missteps cost lives in Collin County. Those lives were Democratic lives as well as Republican lives, so we was all up in the mix, all of us. And so that begs the following questions. How much of the money in your proposed fiscal year 2022 budget have you set aside or allocated to properly manage the risk of loss of life and health impacts of a further COVID outbreak? How much of money have you put aside to cover that? And how much of your budget is funded by the American Rescue Plan? And how much of those ARP funds have been allocated to things like public health infrastructure and a remediation of the negative economic impact caused by the pandemic? I would suggest that you show how your budget addresses that, because the problem's here. It's not going away unless you do something about it. So how much of your budget is allocated towards fixing that? And as far as health and well-being, health is not just the absence of a disease. Health is when you pay attention to the complete physical, mental, and social well-being of all your citizens and all your students, all right? Especially the students. School is starting now, this week, and my granddaughter's gonna be starting school. And I guarantee you she will have her mask on all day, regardless of what that guy up there in Austin says, all right? My granddaughter's gonna wear her mask. And so you as the leaders of the community, like I say, lead, If you lead, the people will follow. Simple as that. And finally, I'm asking this court to explain how it determined and upon what metrics did it base its proposed budget
Thank you,
amounts
Mr.
to
Ash.
manage the risk of
Thank you, sir.
of
We
the
appreciate
COVID
you
outbreak.
being with us today.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Ms. Cynthia Bruvey. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you for joining us. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank all of you for your service and for the opportunity to speak unsuppressed. It looks like we have a nice population of people who came that have been influenced in one direction, but I can promise you that if we were all warned that we needed to come up here and tell you that we should vaccinate our children and you should lead, we would have all shown up. And there's a lot of us. We don't want our children vaccinated unless we decide we want them vaccinated, and we appreciate your leadership. By not telling us what we should do, you're giving us the opportunity to think for ourselves. Appreciate it. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm actually here to talk about the budget. I've met Sheriff Skinner a few times at different functions, and we talked one day about how I think the biggest area where we need help from him as a sheriff and from our police chiefs is we need them to be clear and that they need to offer leadership to you. When you're establishing your budget, please consider the fact that we have millions of people that have come over the border. We're gonna have an increase in drug and sex trafficking, and it's gonna be here. And our sheriff's department are gonna be the ones that have to cover that. And so don't get cheap when it comes to protecting us. I don't want to worry about my kids, which I don't have any that are school age anymore, whether or not they're buying drugs. And there's also the crime, the suicide rate and depression and a lot of other things. Please be sure that you're investing. Anticipate that the rampant growth in this community and our county is gonna cost us a lot more if y'all don't step it up, even if you have to raise our taxes. This is one time where I actually would tell you, don't worry about the tax rate, worry about delivering what we're gonna need. We have thousands and thousands of people that have shown up, living in apartments. It's affecting how much it's costing. It's costing more to serve that public, but we also have our judicial system dying. They are so busy and they can't sufficiently take on all this extra. It's not just crime, it's divorce rate, it's conflict, business conflict, but we really need you to double it if you have to. and I'm not kidding, anticipate what's gonna happen to us if we assume that we're the safe community that we were a year ago. Everybody's worried about the COVID. They need to learn how to heal their bodies if they get it. But I can't do anything about whether or not the cartel is sitting over in Princeton. And the sheriff's department is having to cover all of that rustic area. And that's where a lot of this is happening. And if you look at the difference in the schools and the drug use, there's probably a
Thank you,
difference
Ms.
there.
Bruvey.
Thank you so much, and I
Appreciate
appreciate
you
you.
with us today. Our next speaker will be Mr. Joshua Murray. Welcome, Mr. Murray. Thank you for joining us today. You have 3 minutes.
As it's budget season, I see that we also are like putting together like policies and things along those lines. And so I just wanted to speak kind of about the importance of a policy that might be considered by the Commissioners Court. And that'd be one that is indicative of like the Constitution of the United States. And like what's very, very important about this document is that, you know, it's up for interpretation. Was originally like created, it's been modified, amended. You know, because our founding fathers actually realized that, like, you know, it would be necessary for a nation that's going to grow and actually survive to be able to modify it with the right legislation. But the most important thing about it is that it establishes separation of powers. And really, if you use it as the principles for all governments, then what you'll see is that there's a need for a policy within the Commissioners Court. And more specifically, it is that if you consider Judge Hill to be the executive branch and y'all to be the legislative branch, then we have the district attorney's office, district clerk, these are the judicial branch. There's no reason that the executive branch should be able to unilaterally request things from the judicial branch. This should be something that's authorized by the legislative branch, so the Commissioners Court, so that it doesn't allow him to overreach and extend his powers. So I'd ask that y'all consider a policy that can be put into place that would allow the Commissioners Court to authorize such things as like emails and other types of communication so that the judge can't do it unilaterally. The second thing that I wanted to touch on was Judge Hill, you asked about vaccination rates. Thanks for sharing that you Collin County's mass vaccination hub administered 109,000 vaccines. It's important to put this into numbers so that maybe you're not confused and you better understand it. And so, for example, when compared to our population, that's roughly 10%. If you look at Denton County, they administered 371,546 vaccines from their mass vaccination hub. They have a population of 915,000. This is a 41%, 400 times more than our mass vaccination hub. Dallas County administered 500,000 vaccines from the mass vaccination hub. They have a population of a little over 2.6 million. This is 19%, roughly 100% more than your mass vaccination hub. So why don't you put it together, get it on the agenda, so you can put together lessons learned, so you can better inform yourself, so you're not so confused, so you're not wrong, so you do understand that you did fail. Thank you.
Mr. Murray. Appreciate you being with us today. Our next speaker is going to be Ms. Sonia Huerta. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you for joining us today. You have 3 minutes.
I would like to start off by saying I am a first-generation citizen. My dad came over to this country when he was 7 years old. Neither he or I have participated in the selling of drugs or sex trafficking. With that being said, every citizen of Collin County should be deeply disappointed by your budgetary priorities. With around $72 million undistributed dollars just sitting around with an amazing influx of cash, thanks solely to Democrats from the American Rescue Plan Action, we have an opportunity to truly help people. Instead, you're starving life path and grace to change in order to spend millions on expanding the jail. This is unacceptable. If you funded the programs for mental health at the front end, you wouldn't have to play catch up at the detention center at the back. Government exists to provide people with services. This is literally your job. If you don't have good ideas, ask people who do. Instead of giving the public tiny opportunities for input and holding meetings during business hours, don't count. Do what other countries have done and conduct surveys. You'd learn that people want positive programs versus punitive ones. You'd hear that people want affordable, accessible health care. Right now, we aren't getting it. Collin County does a horrible job providing health care to our residents. We're sending our most critical cases to Parkland Hospital in Dallas, knowing they, unlike we, will do the right thing and treat them. But Parkland's overwhelmed, just like every hospital in Texas. This is because our leaders, unlike you, are allowing COVID to overwhelm and literally kill us. You are refusing to keep our people safe. Yes, our idiot governor is trying to get us killed, but there are things that you can do. Encourage vaccines, encourage people to wear masks, and use our county funds to help people weather this storm. Give the $72 million in undistributed funds to LifePath. They desperately need it instead of using the ARPA funds to improve our medical examiner's office. Use the money to help increase mental health programs. Apply for block grants to help increase public health care access in rural areas. Right now, they barely got anything. Significantly increase Race to Change's budget. Substance abuse is on the rise due to the pandemic, so give them the money they need to help combat it. Help our exhausted healthcare workers by establishing programs to promote their mental health. Healthcare workers are quitting, even mid-shift, because they're too stressed out to continue. We already have a shortage and can't afford to lose anyone. And that's not even mentioning the PTSD this will cause to many of those healthcare providers for years after this. Help them. Your priorities are messed up. You've spent hours worried about the recruitment of detention officers, yet you have barely discussed mental health. Mental health programs offer far-reaching positive effects on families and communities. Detention facilities do not.
Thank you, Ms. Huerta. Appreciate you being with us today. Next, we'll hear from Ro Omir. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you for joining us today. And you have 3 minutes.
Just real quick, I usually allow my friends to call me Ro, but everybody else usually calls me Ro Omir. But to get started, thank you guys for having me. I like to quote our Commissioner Hale. I think you're correct that the government isn't going to protect anyone. I find this comment problematic because Collin County taxpayers have given over 50% of the budget to public safety. If we are investing a majority of our resources to public safety, then why shouldn't we expect the government, our governing body, to protect the citizens? We have the expectation that if we are investing so much into the departments that are called to protect and serve the communities, we should see some type of return. Instead, we're seeing officers being not adequately compensated, understaffed jails, and officers that continue to seek professional development and trainings that are not readily available. We do not want to continue to see officers body slamming young girls into concrete sidewalks, suffocating people that are having mental breakdowns while being detained, or idly standing by as women in distress are to the point to where they lose their children during childbirth. If Commissioner Hale is correct in saying that we should not depend on the departments that receive public safety funding to protect our citizens, then why can we not reallocate some of that funding to healthcare or to our small businesses in Collin County? With the Lambda variant that has arrived at our doorsteps, which is said to be resistant to the vaccine that everybody has received, it's making all the progress that we've made in Collin County futile. Give us the funding to be able to empower our communities to protect themselves and empower our businesses to keep their doors open and keep the customer safe. We have stated several times, or at least I have stated, that we could use some of these funding to be able to reallocate to building some type of to expanding our healthcare system. And as we go into 2022, we hope that you all consider thinking of how we can better utilize our funds to be able to support our communities in protecting themselves and building up Collin County community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being with us. This time, we're gonna move to our consent agenda. These are items of a routine nature that we're going to consider in a single vote unless a member of the court would like to separate an item. This time, I'll entertain any motion or discussion.
I'd like to pull 3D2.
Judge, I'd like to pull 3E2 for recusal.
Yes.
Move for approval. Second reading.
We have a motion and a second on the remainder. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Item 3D2, Commissioner Webb.
Yep, I support this. I just would like to add, if you go to page 151.